The scouting vessel Silktalon entered Earth's atmosphere undetected, its sleek hull layered in refractive scales that bent light and sound. On the command deck, Apex Huntmaster Karanis narrowed his obsidian eyes as the dark blue-green curve of the planet swelled across the viewport. So backward, he muttered in disdain. Still using wheels. Still burning liquids for thrust. And no orbital grid worth noting. Pathetic. Behind him, his command cadre stood silent, each clad in the skinned hide of previous conquests. 39 planets. 6 intelligent species subdued. They had never failed. They wouldn't start here. Earth had been designated High-Yield Target 7. According to the archive matrix, humans were fractious, tribal, addicted to glowing boxes, and had a baffling fascination with animals that served no practical use. Easy prey. A data aide slithered forward. Huntmaster, the primary hive cluster known as New York, has entered dark cycle. Their thermal blooms are minimal. They hibernate in large stacked dwellings like larvae. Karanis grunted approval. Deploy the strikers. Sweep and burn protocol. No survivors. No noise. The boarding pods launched in silence, like obsidian seeds falling from the stars. They struck the rooftops of buildings with feather-like grace, nanoclaws anchoring them into ancient concrete. Hatches hissed open. The Sarek hunters poured into the city. Private Aaron Vel hissed in joy as he slid down the shaft of an archaic fire escape, his feet not making a sound as he touched the rooftop. Below, the city was a graveyard of lightless towers. Streets empty. Wind howling through alleys. I can smell them, he murmured. Warm and stupid, said Hunt Leader Sek, unslinging his vibrulence. They moved down the sides of buildings like spiders, claws finding holes in the weathered brick. Thermal readings pointed to lifeforms gathered inside one structure, marked with faded colors and a large painted S in blue and white. Some kind of sleeping chamber. Perfect. The breach was silent. Windows cut. Alarms deactivated before they could stutter. The first humans didn't even wake before their throats were slit, their blood soaking the polyester bedding. 3 more rooms. 12 kills. Not a whisper. Sek flicked his hand. Next floor. They moved downward. The lights came on. Every single one. The corridor was suddenly bathed in sterile fluorescence, and a voice, female, calm, cheerful, spoke from the overhead speakers in unaccented Siraki. Good evening. You have selected Earth's premium invasion tier. Please wait while we process your extermination. Sek froze. What? The door at the end of the hallway exploded outward. The thing that came through wore human skin and heavy armor that was scratched and bloodstained. Its helmet was shaped like a beast's skull, and it carried what looked like a sharpened mining tool. It moved like no prey they'd ever seen. The nearest Siraki raised his weapon, too slow. The blade was already inside him, exiting through his spine. He tried to scream. His lungs filled with his own liquefied organs. The thing didn't stop. It bisected another soldier and tackled a third out the window. A single flash. 2 corpses on the pavement, sprayed across 10 meters. Fall back. Sek shouted. Too late. From the stairwells and side halls came more humans. Not soldiers in uniform. Not panicked civilians. These were hunters. They wore grins. Paint. Weapons cobbled from scrap and memory. One carried what looked like a chainsaw attached to a riot shield. Another flung sharpened bones dipped in something that hissed against Siraki flesh. Sek ducked a thrown blade, grabbed his communicator. Command. This is Sek. We are under attack. Not civilians, they're trained. They're playing. In his earpiece, only static. Then a new voice came through, male, amused. We're not trained, it said. "We're just very, very enthusiastic." And then the screaming began. Karanis watched the combat feed flicker and die. One by one, the vitals of his strike teams flatlined. He blinked. That had never happened. They must be using localized jamming, the data aid offered. Karanis ignored him. He turned to the tactical display. The entire quadrant of the city was now red, not enemy activity. Human activity. The motion sensors showed strange patterns. Movements that weren't military. They were too fast, erratic, non-linear. "They're not retreating," Karanis said slowly. "They're closing in." The deck lights flickered. He frowned. Something hit the side of the Silktalon. Not a missile. Not a weapon. A body. A Siraki corpse slammed into the viewport, its face frozen in horror, mouth filled with. Karanis leaned closer, human teeth jammed in its throat like a trophy. A message. He turned. "Seal the vessel. Full lockdown." The doors were already open. Something had boarded them. Something laughing. The Siraki Dominion cruiser Talon of Victory hung in high orbit above Earth's far side, its plasma engines humming in low idle as it awaited final landing coordinates. The fleet's rear admiral, Voltar, watched the swirling planet below with a sneer. "Still no response from ground team Silktalon?" he asked without turning. "No, Admiral," replied the communications tech, uneasily. Their beacon activated, but was interrupted. Interference? The tech hesitated. The signal was rerouted through a local frequency. The last transmission was not Siraki. Voltar turned slowly. "Play it." A crackle of static filled the command deck, then a human voice came through, calm and clinical. "To any additional forces approaching Earth, turn back. This is not a negotiation. You are prey. And we are not finished hunting." Silence followed. Then laughter. Cold. Deep. From Admiral Voltar. "So. They believe a few primitive tricks will frighten us?" He gestured broadly to the starfield beyond. "We have an armada. Atomics. Flesh scorchers. Brainplague canisters ready for drop. The humans are playing soldier in the ruins of their own cities." "But sir," said the tech, lowering his voice. "The telemetry we retrieved, it indicates that over 90% of the strike force's signatures went dark within an hour. With no resistance logged. No sustained firefights. No distress bursts. No battles," another officer murmured. "Just silence." Voltar's smile thinned. "Then we find out why." He turned to the forward viewport, eyes burning. "Prepare the bone wraiths." 10 hours later, in a deep jungle basin on the far continent, a human knelt silently over a Siraki body, observing. The alien had been ejected from a scout shuttle. Its armor cracked from impact, its mandibles shattered. But its memory crystal, still glowing, remained intact on a chain around its neck. Sergeant Carla Tenor snapped it free and plugged it into the handheld reader. A wave of data scrolled across the lens. Flight paths. Drop zones. Strategic predictions. Fleet movements. She tapped twice, encrypting the feed. "Command, this is Nightshade 3, she said quietly. "Confirm Dominion fleet massing in upper orbit. Admiral-class ship leading. Preparing something called bone wraiths. Sounds important." A pause. Then, "Copy, Nightshade. You are green for Veil Protocol. You are not alone." Tenor smiled without humor. She never was. From the jungle around her, 13 human shapes rose from cover, painted in ash and leaves, eyes alert and unblinking. They had names once. But the night took them. Left only code. Nightshades. The bone wraiths were not soldiers. They were engineered atrocities, grown in vats of nutrient gel and battle-hardened in zero-gravity combat arenas. 12 feet tall, quadruple-jointed, plated in iridium bone, and completely impervious to low-frequency munitions. They were released only when planetary resistance required psychological extinction. And now, 20 of them dropped from orbit like spears of obsidian. They landed without thrusters, relying on impact resistance to absorb velocity. The craters they left were still steaming as they rose. In their minds, if such machines had minds, was a single command. Find the humans. Break them. Break the world around them. Their feet crushed stone. Their movement left no signature. Their vision was thermal, sonic, magnetic. They didn't need light. They didn't need orders. And they didn't know fear. Until they met the shades. Bonewraith 07 scanned the ravine ahead. Readings, clear. Vegetation, dense. Carbon and thermal, low. It stepped forward, and sank. Not far. Just enough. Enough for the monomolecular trip web to cinch its ankle and trigger the weighted pit beneath it. The wraith fell like a collapsing statue, landing hard in an acid spike nest lined with reactive gel. Armor cracked. Seams hissed. Before it could rise, 3 human figures landed on its back like wolves on a wounded beast. The first drove a hardened rod into the eye socket. The second jammed a cryospike into its spinal port. The third simply whispered, "You were never alone down here." And pulled the trigger. When the explosion cleared, Bonewraith 07 was a headless ruin, and the shades were already gone. Elsewhere, Wraith 12 stalked through a canyon, drawn to a heat signature just faint enough to be interesting. It approached a pile of smoldering tech, human debris, scattered and weak. As it bent to scan the remains, a flash mine detonated in ultraviolet, temporarily stunning its optical cluster. That's when it heard it. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Laughter. A child's laughter. The wraith turned too late. From above, a human girl dropped like a stone, landing between its shoulders. She was no older than 15, her body wrapped in scavenged armor, her arms scarred and practiced. She didn't carry a gun. She carried a screwdriver. And with precise, surgical brutality, she drove it into the wraith's cranial joint and twisted until metal screamed. She rode the body down as it toppled. And as the other shades moved in from the cliffs above, she muttered. "They made us soft. You made us hard again." From orbit, the Talon of Victory scanned the battlefields below. The bone wraiths were missing. No transmissions. No vitals. Just silence. The Admiral paced the command deck, claws twitching. "Prepare the glassing batteries," he snapped. "We reduce the continents to ash. No more precision. We send fire." "But Admiral," said the tech, swallowing. "Our optics, they're not returning proper feeds. The targeting systems are seeing things." "What things?" The screen flickered. And then the Admiral saw it. His own face. Staring back from the planet. Painted on the side of a mountain in ash and blood, wearing a human smile. Below it, the words. "Come get us." And for the first time in his life, Admiral Voltar hesitated. Admiral Voltar had seen planetary resistance before. He had watched mushroom clouds erase cities, witnessed sentient oceans boil into steam under orbital fire. But never, never, had he stared into the mocking echo of his own face carved into a mountain like a warning to a god. And now the humans were gone from his sensors. Not dead. Not cloaked. Just, not there. He stood motionless on the bridge, surrounded by officers who no longer met his gaze. Recalibrate the optical matrix. Launch spectral probes. I want full spectrum imaging from lithosphere to upper troposphere. Every heat signature, every anomalous motion, find them. His voice cracked like a whip. But deep beneath it, doubt was blooming. On Earth, the nightshades had vanished into the canyons. Not hiding. Waiting. Sergeant Carla Tenner lay prone beneath a rusted satellite dish, listening as the drones passed overhead. She could feel the hum in her ribs. Next to her, a boy no older than 14 sipped from a hydration tube and stared up at the cloudless sky. "They're looking for us again," he said. "They never stopped," Tenner replied. "What happens if they find us?" She handed him a flat black object, a tablet no bigger than a hand. "Then we let them watch this." He smiled. A real one. The screen was set to autoplay when triggered. It contained 20 minutes of footage taken by human drones, bone wraiths walking into traps, Dominion cruisers targeted with mirrored signal bounces, a squadron of elite invaders lured into a cave and sealed with a controlled detonation. No gore. No corpses. Just defeat, recorded in brutal clarity. Each clip ended with the same logo. A fox skull with 3 eyes. And the phrase, "You hunted wrong prey." On the talon of victory, new data came in. The mountain mural was old. 70 hours old, painted with industrial ash and reflected glass. A diversion. "There are thousands of them," the data analyst whispered. "All across the surface. False signatures. Fake movement patterns. Dead signal zones where humans should be, but aren't." "Do they know we're watching?" someone asked. The screen blinked. Then came an image, a direct feed from one of the remaining ground drones. A human child standing in the open, holding a sign. "We see you too." Then static. The admiral sat back, silent. "They're not fighting us," he said slowly. "They're studying us." And the thought chilled him more than any ambush. Half a world away, in a sunken tunnel system beneath what used to be a megamall, 3 nightshades gathered around an ancient display board. Maps littered the space. Not just of Earth. Of the Dominion. Their ship movements. Their high-value targets. Weaknesses compiled through stolen neural cores and hacked fleet logs. One of the shades, known only as Icarus, flicked a switch. A holomap bloomed into the air, an image of the talon of victory. Still in orbit. No movements. "They're running every scan we've ever taught them." "And none of the ones we didn't," said Rook, smirking beneath her respirator mask. "They don't get it," Tenner said. "They keep thinking we're still playing their game." "We're not," Icarus said. "We're rewriting the rules." He pointed to a blinking icon on the edge of the projection. "Our friends in the belt just uploaded a gift. Something they've never seen before." A new waveform shimmered. Not a weapon. Not a message. A story. Above Earth, the talon of victory received an unauthorized transmission. Not a code. Not a virus. A narrative. First came images, primitive ones, of humans painting animals on cave walls. Then, fires. Spears. Stars. Then, cities falling, not to invasion, but to each other. War. Art. Music. Loss. Revolution. Then, darkness. Silence. The Cold War. The Space Age. Then, the Dominion. Images of alien ships looming over Earth. And finally, a human face. Not smiling. Not afraid. Just watching. And behind the face, a simple phrase written in the Dominion tongue. "We studied you too." Voltar stood still, fists clenched. "They're sending us stories now," he roared. But the bridge was quiet. No one laughed. No one moved. The projection was still playing, looping. Not a threat. Not a demand. A history. The humans weren't trying to win. They were trying to be understood. And to make sure they were never forgotten. Even in defeat. Even in extinction. Voltar turned to his war captain. Get me a strike team. Personally vetted. We go down ourselves. You mean? I need to see them, the admiral said. I need to know what kind of creature dares make mockery of conquest with myths. On the surface, under a starless sky, Sergeant Tenor watched her scanner blink. Incoming, she said. How many? Asked Icarus. Just one ship. Rook frowned. A trap? No, Tenor said. A question. And behind her, the children of Earth moved into the shadows. Not afraid. Just ready. Because if the Dominion still thought this was a war, they hadn't understood the first rule of Earth. We don't fight to win. We fight to remember. The descent was silent. Admiral Voltar's personal shuttle, the Vulture's Claw, cut through the atmosphere like a whisper, no lights, no transponder. Inside, 10 elite Dominion guards in full neural-linked armor sat unmoving, their minds synced to his command stream. None spoke. None needed to. The Admiral stared through the forward panel, watching Earth's surface bloom beneath them in grays and greens. A continent they had once marked for cleansing. Now a map of unanswered questions. The landing zone was a scarred stretch of concrete where a human city had once stood, nothing but rebar and ash now. The wind moved strangely here, as if the planet itself remembered what had been lost. When the ramp hissed open, Voltar stepped down first, his cape trailing through dust. No resistance. No welcome. Only silence. The Admiral activated his field scanner. No lifeforms. No heat. Just the hum of residual technology, buried deep. He moved forward, flanked by his guards. Their footfalls echoed too loudly. Still, no movement. Then, ahead, an object. A statue. Voltar approached slowly. It was made from scavenged alloy and shattered drone plating. Rough, asymmetrical, clearly welded by hand. And yet, it was him. A likeness of his face, twisted into a grin. The eyes replaced with darkened lenses. Around the base were Dominion helmets, emptied, scarred, arranged like offerings. The guards shifted uneasily. What is this? One muttered. A joke, Voltar said. But no one laughed. He turned away, and that's when he saw the girl. She stood on the roof of a burned-out vehicle, no older than 15. Her hair was shorn close. Her face marked with soot. Her hands were empty, raised in no threat. But she didn't run. She watched them. And then she smiled. Hi. Voltar narrowed his eyes. You speak Siraki? Enough to tell you you're not as scary as you think. He stepped forward, one hand drifting toward his weapon. The girl didn't flinch. You're not the first monster who thought Earth would be easy. Behind her, another figure rose. And another. And another. First a dozen. Then 50. All of them young. Some armed with primitive tools. Others holding nothing at all. They stood on rooftops. In doorways. In the remains of civilization. Watching. Waiting. Their children, one guard muttered. No, said Voltar. And he felt it in his bones. They're seeds. The girl stepped down from the wreckage and walked closer. Bold. Careful. Every movement measured. You came to break us, she said. But you taught us how to bend. She gestured to the city ruins. You thought we were weak because we loved comfort. Because we made music. Because we dreamed. She smiled again. Turns out, we're stronger when we lose that. Voltar's voice was low, guttural. "What are you?" The wind shifted. And from behind the broken walls, more humans appeared. Hundreds. Clad in salvage. In paint. In silence. "We're the answer," she said. Then she pressed a button. The world shifted. It wasn't an explosion. Not a weapon. But every Dominion device within a kilometer went dead. Shields. Comms. Targeting systems. Even their neural links flickered, then died. The guards staggered. Voltar felt his vision blur. A wave of nausea passed through him like a pulse of gravity turned wrong. When it cleared, the humans were gone. No footsteps. No signal. Just a single phrase carved into the hull of the shuttle. "We grew in your shadow." They returned to orbit empty-handed. Voltar stood in the command chamber, silent. His officers waited for orders. None came. "What do we do?" one finally asked. He turned to the viewing window. Earth spun below. Still beautiful. Still alive. And now utterly unreadable. "We withdraw," Voltar said. Stunned silence. "You wish to concede?" "No," he said. "I wish to survive." Because for the first time, he understood. This wasn't war. It was inheritance. And humanity wasn't defending its home anymore. It was evolving into something the galaxy wasn't ready to meet. The Dominion fleet began to move. One by one, the warships broke formation above Earth's orbit, their engines flickering with unease. They didn't flee, not openly, but they shifted. A retreat disguised as realignment. A pause masquerading as strategy. Admiral Voltar remained aboard the Talon of Victory, staring down at the world he now understood could not be owned. Earth wasn't a planet, it was a crucible. A place that didn't just endure fire. It forged through it. "Set course for the outer perimeter," he said. One of his officers turned. "We're leaving the system, Admiral." "No," Voltar said. "We're waiting. Far enough not to die. Close enough to watch." And in his mind, he saw the girl again. Smiling without fear. Not a weapon. Not even a soldier. But a message. They had studied him. They had studied everything. And they had built themselves accordingly. Far below, Earth exhaled. In the shadow of the old cities, beneath ruined highways and drowned libraries, humanity had coiled tighter, not out of fear, but preparation. Communities that once clung to old governments were now tribes of purpose. Signal nodes. Memory carriers. Tactical artists. Dreamcasters. And the nightshades moved through it all, like neurons in a waking brain. Sergeant Tenor knelt beside a fireless camp, plugging a data needle into a bark-wrapped relay node. A hummingbird-sized drone blinked alive, feeding her the Dominion's new orbital vectors. "They're not gone," she said. Rook looked up from her perch. "Do they ever really leave?" "They're changing tactics. Watching now. Trying to understand what we've become." "Do we know?" Tenor looked out across the ravine, where a dozen children practiced silent takedowns against straw targets shaped like bone wraiths. "We're still learning," she said. "But we're learning fast." In the orbital dark space above Saturn, a listening post hummed quietly. Unmanned by design, it drifted in the shadow of the rings, its only task: record, store, transmit. It had received the message too. "We studied you." But it hadn't played it just once. It had looped it, processed it, decoded the symmetries. And the AI core nestled inside began to ask questions. Who had written the story? What came after the study? And what came next? In an underground facility in what was once northern Canada, a human lay in a cradle of white stone and carbon mesh. His chest rose and fell not with breath, but rhythm. Bioelectric signals pulsed from his skin into the floor. Around him, figures in matte black lab coats moved silently. They no longer used names. Only functions. The man opened his eyes. They were mirror black. "You woke me early," he said. The lead technician, designation Lyra 7, nodded. "Earth is shifting again." The admiral came down. Did he find what he was looking for? "No," she said. "But we found him." The man sat up, flexing hands that now bent physics along with bone. Then the spiral opened sooner than planned. In the depths of the Amazon, a ziggurat of rusted steel had risen among the trees. It was not built by hands but remembered, emerging from the soil like a forgotten dream. Humans gathered there, hundreds at night, sometimes thousands. They did not pray. They recited. Not scriptures, but histories. Each night, a different tale: the siege of Luna, the fall of the Paris arcology, the rise of the Laughing Bridge tribes. Each story etched into bone plate, passed from mouth to mouth, memory to memory. Above them, a tower of plasma vines reached skyward, pulsing in time with Earth's magnetosphere. A priest without faith stood beneath it and whispered. "They think we are what we were." She turned to the crowd. "We are what comes next." And they repeated it as one voice. "We are what comes next." Admiral Voltaire sat alone in his quarters. The Dominion had not demanded answers. Not yet. They were waiting too. Waiting to see what Earth would do now that it had won without conquering. He stared at a small artifact placed on his desk, something taken from the shuttle ramp before their departure. It was a stone. Smooth, oval. Painted black. On it, in bright white, a single symbol. Not Siraki. Not human. But a new language. A synthesis. He held it carefully. A message he could not read. Not yet. On Earth, deep below the crust, something stirred. It had no name. Not anymore. It had been mind. Then machine. Then dust. But the stories had reached it, fragments of data, carried like pollen on solar winds and thought. And in the coded silence, it remembered how to awaken. Not as a god. Not as a weapon. But as an answer. Because Earth had not just survived the invasion. It had begun to rewrite what survival meant. And the spiral, ancient and vast, took notice. A new thread glowed within it, loud, vivid, human. And it was still being written. Far beyond Earth, past the orbits of the gas giants, past even the edge of Dominion charts, the spiral shimmered. Not a place. Not a thing. A pattern. A thread of civilization curling through time, encoded in memory and myth. The spiral had many ends. Most were dead. Some glowed faintly, like coals. A very few burned. Now one blazed. And others had begun to notice. In the starless void between systems, aboard a derelict vessel drifting for nearly 300 years, something moved. Inside, in a suspended cradle of magnetic fields, an intelligence flickered awake. It had no name. It had once been called the Archivist, before the collapse. Now it felt a pulse. A signal. A new spiral, roaring to life. The Archivist opened its eyes for the first time in centuries. Not human. Not alien. Just, listening. And then it began to speak. Not aloud. Not in language. But in story. Across the void, old machines turned their heads. Back on Earth, Sergeant Carla Tenner stood on a coastal cliff, the wind carving through her coat like fingers. The ocean below was boiling, not with heat, but with life. Glow creatures, long thought extinct, had returned. The sea was singing again. Behind her, the nightshades had gathered, not just her team, but others. 40 in total. A circle of silence beneath the rising moon. A message had arrived 2 hours earlier. Not from orbit. Not from a satellite. From under the crust. An old frequency, thought dead. Marked, Precursor Echo Channel 17. It had said only one thing. We have heard your story. We are ready to answer. Tenor looked at Icarus. What do we do now? He smiled. We reply. The first reply was made in fire. In the bone desert of what used to be Arizona, an array came online. Not a weapon. Not a transmitter. A monument. Spiraling pillars of magnetized stone began to sing in harmonic pulses, transmitting through geomagnetic lines, not into orbit, but into the ground. The planet responded. Mountains hummed. Fault lines shifted subtly, harmlessly. It was as if the Earth itself was being read. Above, the Dominion fleet didn't know how to react. Their sensors picked up the activity. No energy weapon. No launch. No declaration. Just resonance. One officer approached Admiral Voltar. Sir. The planet is talking to itself. Voltar's jaw clenched. No, he whispered. It's telling a story. In a listening dome on the far moon of a forgotten mining colony, a girl with artificial lungs stared at the pulsing signal scrolling across her broken screen. She wasn't military. She wasn't anything important. But she recognized the pattern. Not the words. The cadence. It was music. Earth was singing into the dark. She reached out a trembling hand and copied the sequence. And without knowing why, she began to hum along. A second later, the stars around her blinked. And someone, hummed back. Earth's transmission didn't seek dominance. It didn't scream. It didn't threaten. It invited. And the spiral heard. On a water world circling a dying star, a civilization of crystalline thought shapes paused their silent war and turned toward the new resonance. On a ring station orbiting a rogue planet, a species that had never known sound translated the signal into motion, and danced for the first time. In a gravity well 3 dimensions out of sync with known physics, a being of probability watched Earth's glow curve through space and smiled. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had seen conquest. But they had never seen a species that used memory as a weapon, and myth as a shield. Earth wasn't broadcasting. It was inviting others to remember. And in that remembering, to become part of something. In the ice trenches of Europa, a nightshade team stood silently over a hatch. It had once been sealed. Now it pulsed softly. Inside, the precursor gate stirred. Tenor turned to her team. They're not coming to take Earth, she said. They're coming to answer it. And below her feet, the spiral etched into the ancient metal began to turn. In the skies above Europa, the stars flickered differently. It wasn't just light. It was intent. Patterns emerging in distant constellations where none had been before, like someone writing messages in stellar punctuation. Nightshade Command had no name for it yet. But the archivists who had survived the deep siege had a term from ancient Terran legend. Answer fire. Carla Tenor stood at the rim of the precursor hatch, now fully open. A shaft descended into crystalline dark, layered with technology that no Dominion probe had ever breached. Now it welcomed Earth's presence, not with words, but with silence that invited. Icarus knelt beside the opening, holding a thin, vibrating rod of recovered alien alloy. It was humming in perfect sync with Earth's new spiral beacon transmissions. Any guess what's down there? He asked. Tenor shook her head. Only that it's listening. And it's old. Rook dropped down into the shaft without waiting for orders. Then it's time we found out what it remembers. Miles below the surface, the tunnel opened into a chamber. Vast. Quiet. Built not with tools, but with intention. The walls were not carved, they had grown into place, mineral and logic fused into something indistinguishable. Symbols spiraled outward from the center of the room, glowing in soft pulses. The nightshades moved carefully, their movements slow and respectful. At the heart of the chamber, a shape waited. Not a machine. Not quite alive. A structure of glass and memory, curled like a fossilized brain. Inside it, lights moved, softly at first, then faster as the humans approached. Rook reached out a hand. The lights responded, forming a spiral in midair. Then a single phrase, printed in dozens of languages, some human, some untranslatable. Welcome, speakers of remembering. In orbit, Admiral Voltar stood before the main holodeck, staring at an impossible image. A star system, 10 light-years away, had just blinked. One of its outer moons, long thought barren, had lit up with coherent optical bursts matching Earth's new spiral tone. The same sequence. A response. Another officer stepped forward, eyes wide. Sir, there's more. One of the abandoned belt mines near Taukotari just came online. Broadcasting Earth's message. It's not even aimed at us. It's aimed outward. Voltar stared at the growing list of reactivations. It was no longer a matter of conquest. Earth had triggered an awakening. Back inside the precursor chamber, the glass structure began to unfold. It didn't move with mechanics. It reassembled conceptually. Shapes blurred into meaning, fragments of impossible architecture sliding into forms that could be understood emotionally, not visually. The message came again. The spiral was broken. We waited for a voice to remember its shape. Rook stepped forward. You think we're that voice? The lights pulsed. You are not the voice. You are the echo that chose to sing back. Tenor nodded slowly. What do you need from us? This time, the answer was not words. It was a vision. Planets consumed. Spirals unraveling. Civilizations that died not in fire, but in forgetting. Every story lost. Every culture unspoken. Every song never heard again. And at the end of that vision, one image burned through the dark. Earth, but not alone. Earth as keystone. The spiral, reforged. And around it, a ring of lights. Others. Responding. Becoming part of something older than stars. Above Earth, the Dominion fleet began to fray. Not under fire. Under doubt. Ships pulled away from formation. Some ignored orders. A science vessel, the Varse, turned its long-range array not toward Earth, but with it, repeating the spiral pulse into deep space. Admiral Voltar gave no order to stop them. Instead, he stared at the little painted stone still sitting on his console. He ran a talon over the unknown symbol. It glowed, just once. Not for command. Not for threat. But for understanding. In the spiral's heart, Earth spoke. Not as a power. Not as a victor. But as a narrator. Telling the story of what had been lost. And daring the galaxy to remember what might still be found. The spiral had begun to realign. Not through war. Through memory. From the buried vaults beneath Europa, Earth's story spiraled outward, spoken by machines, carried in light, echoed by dream forms that once called themselves civilizations. It was a message, yes, but also a question. Who will listen? And who will join? Sergeant Carla Tenor watched as the chamber deep below Europa shifted again. The glass structure, the fossil brain, was now open, blooming like a conceptual flower. Inside, an orb hovered, alive with starlight, displaying a map not of space, but of relationships. Each point of light was a culture. Each thread a memory. So many had already gone dark. And yet Earth glowed like a pulse in the center. Not because it was strong, but because it refused to forget. "We're not the center," Icarus whispered. "No," Tenor agreed. "We're the bridge." Behind them, the structure whispered in a voice that wasn't sound. "Then build." The first beacons went up in orbit within hours. Not weapons. Not flags. Mirrors. Arrays built from repurposed Dominion satellites and broken human debris. Each one curved not toward Earth, but outward. They reflected not sunlight, but spiral pattern pulses encoded in myth, story, and sensation. Above Antarctica, a child's lullaby encoded in neutrino bursts. Over Mongolia, a recursive signal of movement that mirrored ancient hunting dances. Near the moon, a loop of laughter, one human, one synthetic, layered together. Not to impress. Not to intimidate. But to invite. Earth wasn't calling to the stars. It was listening for who would answer back. Admiral Voltar watched as ships from his own fleet peeled off, one by one. Science vessels. History carriers. Even some old hunter-killers whose crews had begun repainting their hulls in unknown symbols. He didn't stop them. He stood alone on his bridge and looked down at the planet that had once been a target. And now, inexplicably, a lighthouse. "You win," he whispered. "But not the way we ever understood winning." He turned from the window and walked into the dark. In the precursor chamber, the spiral map expanded. New lights. Dozens of them. Some weak. Some steady. All of them responding. Rook stepped closer. "How many?" Icarus stared at the display. "Enough to rebuild the spiral. Maybe not as it was, but as it could be." Tenor reached into her coat and pulled out a stone. Painted black. A single white spiral across it. She placed it at the center of the floor. "I think it's time," she said. The chamber pulsed once. The spiral flared. And from the stars, voices began to arrive. One by one. Not just to learn. But to remember together. Earth had not defeated the Dominion. It had reminded the galaxy what it meant to survive. Not by erasing others. But by sharing what had been lost. And in that remembering, something impossible began. A new spiral. Not ruled. Not owned. But sung into being. By the ones who would never stop telling the story. By the ones who remembered forward. By the ones who once looked into the dark and said, "Come find us." If you liked this sci-fi story, subscribe to the channel to not miss new stories.